Hey everybody, so today I'm going to be reviewing Dead Companies Walking by Scott Fearon, and I got a decent amount to say about this book, but first let me just say, so this was my first kind of soiree into a book about finance or investing ever since reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, and Rich Dad Poor Dad left me scarred. That book was so terrible. That might have been the worst thing that I've ever read. Rich Dad Poor Dad is horrible, and so I had really low expectations going to this book. And so it left me actually a little pleasantly surprised in some aspects. So I can't wait to talk about that. But first, let's just give, so basically the guy, he's a hedge fund manager, and more specifically, he does a lot of short selling. And so for those of you who don't know what short selling is, so basically, so say you see a stock, you see a company that you don't think is going to do very good. You think that they're going to go down in the stock market. So you would borrow shares of that company. So say you borrowed one share of that company from like a brokerage firm, and you borrowed it at $10 a share. And then you sold it, you sell it immediately. And so you have $10, and then you wait for it to go down. And then say it does go down, it goes down to $8 a share. And so you buy that stock, you buy that share at $8, and then you give it back to the brokerage firm because you still owe them one share of a stock. And so you just net made $2 because it went down $2. And so basically what short selling is just the inverse of buying a stock. You think a company is going to go down, and you that you make money off of it that way. And he kind of gives a little bit of his defense of short selling in that book, because a lot of people say that short selling isn't really good. Like, obviously they're profiting off of the failures of companies and people not doing well in business, and people say that that's not very ethical. And he gives his defense that actually it is ethical, and that it helps like weed out the bad companies some way. I actually personally have never really heard a very compelling argument as to why short selling isn't a pretty like greedy sort of thing to do. There's not really a positive for society. Like, I get it, you want to make money, you want to short sell, that's one thing, but to say that it actually has like externality benefits to like the economy and things like that, I've never really heard anything that convinces me that that is the case. So if you're a short seller and you're watching this video, like, please leave a comment below and tell me why you think that short selling is good. But I honestly don't think that short selling is really good. But that's what he does. That's what this guy does. And the whole book is he talks about all these different companies. He probably gives at least 50 different examples of different companies that he, short sold over the years, and just what he was looking at and why he knew that they were bad companies. And so that's basically the whole thing right there. But some of the more interesting parts that I thought was that he actually talks a lot about what he considers like the elitism that exists in the finance industry, and how a lot of it is just, people who are kind of like able to go to like nicer schools because they were born into a wealthy family, and then they get the connections early on, and then it's just, he talks a decent amount about that. And so I was a little pleasantly surprised, because I wasn't expecting to read that, especially once I found out that he was a hedge fund manager. And then he even talked a little bit about how, not a little bit about, he actually talked a decent bit about how he considers like everyone on Wall Street's like a bunch of crooks, and how like, so if you have someone, they like actively manage money, they like almost always perform worse than just like an index fund. And so making what they do like pretty much obsolete. And he talks about that, and how these guys, they like make a bunch of money on fees, but they actually don't like provide any value for like their customers. And so, it was interesting just to hear this hedge fund guy give this take, and the reason that I think that he has this take is he seemed very much like I read a little bit about him. He's a very like kind of new money kind of person. He looks like he didn't really come from like old money like a lot of people that are currently in Wall Street are, and so I think that he just genuinely has a lot of like more libertarian principles on things, and so he doesn't really like. He talks a little bit about the Wall Street bailouts, how he says that the Wall Street bailouts were like absolutely horrible. And I found that really interesting that he, hedge fund guy against the Wall Street bailouts. But I think that is because he is a true libertarian. And so he doesn't think that, the government should be doing much of anything, including helping out Wall Street. And so while I probably would disagree with this guy on like the political philosophy, or not probably, I definitely disagree with this guy on like the philosophy of like his politics, I do respect him a little bit more, because at least he's principled. You have some of these guys on the right that are, they claim to be like, oh, small government this, small government that, but then they support the Wall Street bailouts. And so like, where's the small government in that? So I appreciated him having that stance. And overall, there were parts of this book where I felt like it got a little kind of autobiographical. I feel like a lot of people, they want to write a book about a certain content, but then, they want to talk about themselves because they always want to write a book about themselves, but maybe they're not quite famous enough to warrant a book entirely about themselves. And so they write a book about something, and then they kind of put pieces of themselves in the book. I feel like a lot of people do that. It is not just this book, but there's definitely elements of that in there. But overall, if you're interested in short selling, this is probably a good book for you. If you're interested in finance in general, probably an interesting book. And I do think that this guy does have some interesting takes, if not even interesting, maybe more refreshing, just hearing them come from someone like this. And I think it does kind of get a little bit into just the populist wave that we're seeing right now, where just so many people are fed up with Wall Street and companies like Goldman Sachs just blatantly just doing corrupt things, that even hedge fund managers are like, all right, this isn't sustainable, this isn't okay. But anyway, so that's my take on Dead Companies Walking by Scott Fearon. If you disagreed with anything I said in this review, please leave a comment below. But if you enjoyed, make sure to like and subscribe, and have a great day.